So you have chosen to spend the next hour with us. I am Nathan Case.
And I'm Mike Norris.
We are going to talk to you about supercharging your incident response. Who here is actually an incident responder? Anybody? Nobody? One of us? Sorry, really hard to see. So we got one incident responder, cool. So I am Nathan Case. I picked up a couple of nicknames over time. My favorite is Dumpster Fire Expert. If you know about a dumpster fire, you know about incident response, you know that many times when you find yourself as a consultant getting thrown into an incident, dumpster fire is generally where this goes. The reality of a lot of the things that we'll talk about today come from both personal experience, things that I've seen, and things that I've had to clean up, things that I've helped actually fix and get back to a stable state. Now, all of that said, I try to keep a very positive attitude, and there's a lot of things that we can do before an incident. So today is really about the things that you do before an incident, because most of incident response is actually before the incident. We all get that, right? Preparation is wonderful, as long as you're not doing it during the incident. Not a good look. So as we go into this, this is definitely stuff you do beforehand. This is stuff you think about. Currently, I am a security advocate at Datadog. I am very proud to be here, and if you have questions about things that go with Datadog or how you do incident response in Datadog after this, I'd be more than happy to help you. I guess that doesn't make sense, does it?
Hey everyone, my name is Mike Norris, and I am a security engineer and team security lead at Trek10, who is Trek10, you might ask? We are an AWS Premier Partner and focusing in serverless technologies with AWS exclusively. Over the years, we've been working with Datadog quite a lot. We actually, a core component of our managed service business runs with Datadog as a core piece of that. And so long with them, in fact, that we were one of the first MSPs in North America to start using Datadog and the first gold partner with Datadog. As for myself, prior to Trek10, I was a systems engineer in a handful of on-prem environments, and then started off in cloud ops at Trek10, and then finally transitioned into more of a security-focused role.
So today we're here to talk about incident response. A very wise CISO once said to me over an old-fashioned, incident response is the distilled expression of your technical strategy. Now, when he said this was in the middle of an incident, and the realities of all of the choices that we had all made, or he had made to this point, kind of had come back, and he had to revisit exactly why he'd made the choices that he'd made. So in this case, if we think about distilling something, if we think about the way things are distilled, in general, the concept here is that all of your technical stuff gets pushed together really, really hard because the incident is expressing pressure on the technical systems that you have. And because of that, things come out of the woodwork. You get to know what's actually happening. This is not just a security thing. A lot of the security things that we talk about when we talk about incident response, yeah, I get it. We're talking about bad actors. We're talking about nation states. We're talking about things that happen that are scary. And I get it. Today we're talking about incident response as the technical incident response, but also with an eye towards security. Now, as we think about incident response and we think about the things that go into it, one of the things that we obviously have to talk about is observability and automation. When we talk about observability and automation, we want to be sure that as we think about incident response, we've tested it, we understand it, absolutely. But we need to make sure that the automation is based off observability. Now, how many people here actually do observability, big on DevOps in their organizations? Cool, a couple of us. So when we talk about observability, we're really talking about the way for people to be able to understand how the things in their organization are seen, how they're spending the pieces, parts that most people don't really care about. We want to make sure that the developers, the operationalists, and the security people all have the ability to see the same thing. And today we're going to make a case for that and why that's really important to get to automation. Now, we've talked a little bit about managed service providers in the title. And Mike, you work for an MSP, don't you?
That's true.
Trek10 is obviously a very large MSP. And as we talk about incident response and MSPs, and we talk about the concept of technical planning and strategies, we're talking about a double set of pressure here. So for Mike, day in and day out, if you're an MSP and you go through incident response, that's doubling everything up. Not only am I, as the MSP, or Mike as the MSP, focused on helping that customer and getting that customer's stuff back together, but also then making sure that the incident doesn't happen again. So it's interesting because all of these things then have to be multiplied out to all of the other customers that Mike is able to serve. Now, a little bit about incident response to begin with. I've used this slide before. Incident response is the structured process. Today, we really want to focus on structured process. Those words specifically, in my mind, speak to what incident response should be. Now, how many people here have been through an incident or a bad thing in their life? A couple of us? Is it fun? Did anybody enjoy themselves? I see a lot of shaking heads. Come on, nobody had a good time? Okay, I get it. The reality is it's scary. It's not something that anybody really enjoys. And why is that? Well, you've got somebody attacking you potentially. You've got something that didn't go through a pipeline the right way. It's things that you didn't plan for. It's things that maybe you feel like your job is on the line. So as we think about this, when I think about incident response, as an individual that comes in and helps companies do incident response, what I want to make sure is if we get the opportunity to work at something beforehand, we're going to try to make that scary day a structured process so everybody has something to hold on to and they understand what's going to happen next. Does that make sense? We get that? If you had gone through that scary moment and had that process to hold on to, would that have been helpful? Yeah? So this is the idea. Now, there are lots of ways to do this. We all know what NIST is, yeah? Don't need to, okay, cool. So NIST put together this incident response framework a while ago. I am not a wonderfully large fan. It's one of those like best worst options that you have. The thing here is that as we look at it, it's really complicated. And while it seems horribly simple, that bottom containment, eradication, and recovery bit is awfully touchy. So now we have 3 steps that are really relatively, okay, we get that, not a big deal. And then we have this 3rd step that's really going to make your life horrible. So we're going to talk a little bit about how, when we get into incident response, we can make that a little bit easier. But this really comes down to doing a lot of work and making sure that you've got the preparation up front so that when you do it the first time, it's really not the first time. You want to make sure that first time live is not something that you've done for the first time, for real. Now, that brings us to ODA Loops. Who here has ever heard the word ODA Loop? Anybody? You don't count, Julie. Anybody else? All right. So an ODA Loop was an idea that the US Air Force actually came up with, which allowed pilots to find an item, understand what that item was going to be, how they felt about it, decide what to do with that item, and then act on it. Realistically, as a fighter pilot, that was typically shoot down the enemy plane. The concept here is that we all do ODA loops in our heads anyway. So if you're walking down the street and it's icy, maybe your ODA loop is, hey, how do I make sure I don't fall down and hurt my butt? But the reality is that these ODA loops continue to go and go and go and go. And that's the point. You want to make sure in an incident that you have the observability, observe being the first step, to orient and understand what's going on inside of the system that you're looking at, and then decide how you're going to feel about acting, decide how you're going to act on it. So if we have a nation state actor in one of your customers, that would be bad. That's how we feel about it.
Generally.
Generally a bad thing. And then we're going to act on it. We're going to try to eradicate that actor or get things back to normal. The most important part about an ODA loop is taking notes. As silly as that sounds, the reality here is that we need to make sure that we identify the things that have changed and we understand why we made the decisions that we made. Taking notes is something that we'll talk about today.
Now, I want you to keep in mind as we go through these that I'm going to be talking about this through the lens of an MSP, but really none of this is inherently tied to an MSP. Anybody can apply these concepts or operate under these kind of processes, regardless if you're one person in a team of many or an entire organization. And some of these concepts that we'll be going over today, such as like expediency, reliability, scalability, and of course feedback loops, are kind of guiding principles to how you would, drive through an incident in an IR situation. But with that said, I want to kind of take a moment to highlight that you want to take a step back and not necessarily come away from this thinking that you just throw automation at everything. I mean, you can, and it might work okay for a little while, but there's a few things you should keep in mind as you look at applying some automations to certain processes or where to put them in your company, such as you really need to have a good understanding of your tech stack. If you don't understand your tech stack or your organization, then you're probably going to run into issues down the road as far as abstracting away important things that maybe you didn't want to abstract away. Similarly, you want good guardrails in place. Even the most well-made automation can occasionally go haywire, and the guardrails that you have in place should help keep those things in line. But finally, visibility and robust monitoring. Occasionally, your guardrail will fail. And the monitoring is kind of that last safety net that will allow you to capture some of those failed guardrails or situations. So expediency. In an IR situation, you no doubt want to act fast, but you don't want to do it so fast that you give up quality of the outcome there or do things in a haphazard manner. But that said, you've no doubt heard the phrase that time is money, and from minute zero of an incident, every second that goes by and every minute that goes by can affect your company in a number of ways, whether it's direct, like you can't sell a particular thing or service, which is directly affecting your bottom line, to something more indirect that is like a hit to your company's reputation or a fine from an SLA. Like, none of those things are good, obviously, but with automation, we can improve this response. And the key thing to think about here is that the goal is to take the repetitive tasks that humans are, they can do those, but they're often not very good at doing those repetitively, consistently. Let an automation or an automated process do that and take the human out of that equation so they can focus on the more important problems or the more unique problems that automations can't solve. If you start to do that, you start to get towards a more reliable outcome that you can consistently reproduce. And when you start reproducing those outcomes in this manner, it starts to build a level of trust, and a peace of mind starts to be built into your process, and it helps facilitate future growth. And with that consistent output, you start to get your team or your organization into a place where it allows you to scale in ways that maybe you couldn't before. If you just have one guy that does a thing over and over and over again and he never has time to actually improve that particular process, it makes it really hard to scale. And understandably, as an MSP, whatever individual problem that you might have, multiply that tenfold, because it's not just one person, it's one company, one environment, it's many. Which comes to the final piece, and probably the most important aspect of this, is that if all you do is implement an automation and improve a thing, and then you leave it, and you don't ever come back to it again, it's really just a snapshot of that point in time. It'll probably work for a while, but over time, things will change, processes will drift, and whether it's a week for your company, or a month, or a year, or 10 years, at some point that automation is going to get stale, and it's not going to be as effective as it once was. So the important thing there is to continuously take that feedback and iterate on that process. So, isn't this a security talk?
Kind of. I mean, realistically, when we get right down to it, incident response, in my mind, and you may disagree with me, is always kind of a security thing. Even if we're talking about resiliency, recovery, it's kind of one of those things. So while the S doesn't stand for security in MSP, it stands for service. Part of service, again, in my mind, is security and making sure that we're secure in all the things that we do if we're doing them well. So that brings us to keeping score. So if you're an MSP, and you are, one of the things that we're going to do is keep score. And one of the ways we keep score, frankly, as an MSP is the amount of time that we're spending and the money that we're making, right? So if we think about that and we begin to balance the concept of automation and incident response, and how do we do that well, and not badly, we have the guardrails, then all of a sudden the question becomes how do we keep score? And I think I've made the argument for money. It's a good hourly thing. Now, here's the thing. If we're going to do this well and we're going to keep score, there are a couple of things that we need to do. And one of the things that comes up in my mind is writing it all down. Now, a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, this used to be, I kid you not, actual spiral-bound notebooks. And I'd have a really cool little mechanical pencil. I really liked graph paper. And I would go ahead and I would write out all of the things that we were going to do in an automation. And we do this for everything from deploying a data center, deploying a row of servers, to doing incident response and things that we would detect in our Cisco firewalls way back in the day. And all of a sudden, here we are. We're back to the same thing new, the same thing that was old then is new again now. And so as we look at the things that we're going to talk about today, we're going to talk about notebooks. Notebooks exist in Datadog just like they did in my desk. And as it turns out, here in Datadog, they're actually pretty cool because we can use they're Jupyter notebooks, and they allow us to do all of the things that we have here. I can actually go ahead and build out a notebook that allows me to do a runbook or a playbook. You all have runbooks and playbooks, right? Uh-oh. So it allows you to do runbooks and playbooks. It even has some templates for you so that you can go ahead and help yourself a little bit and build some of those runbooks and playbooks now. And because it's a Jupyter notebook, we can actually automate some portions of this, and we'll talk about that here in a second, that allow us to go ahead and test some of these automations that we want to build in total. Now, again, we have to cover the fact that if you're going to build automations in production, it's dangerous. Please use a development or test system to do this, but it is very good. Now, what is the other benefit to doing case management in general in a middle system, in a middle of the clouds, middle of data centers, take your pick, system as opposed to in the systems themselves? Anybody want to guess? It's on the screen. So we have shared observability. When we say shared observability, we're not talking about, hey, Mike and I can both see the screen here. Well, we kind of are. But the reality is that we have very large systems, and maybe that means that I've got a data center that I'm responsible for right now, and I'm dealing with incident response, right? If we pretend that this side of the room is operations, the three people here are security, and everybody over there is development, are we all going to see the same issue at the same time? I've got a guy back there shaking his head. Anybody want to say yes? No? Okay. So we all agree then that the reality here is that, yeah, you're not going to see it. You're all going to see different points. And I'm sorry, but the developers always seem to point the network to me. I don't know why. But it always seems like it's a network issue, and then we've got to deal with it from there, and we go back and forth and back and forth. And that's fine. But what we're going to try to do here, as we talk about observability, and we talk about Datadog, and we talk about the way this works, is to bring all of those teams together and give them the same pane of glass into the system that actually has the problem. And the reason for that is because we want all of us to work together and actually multiply our efforts as opposed to work against each other. Now, if you do have Datadog, Notebooks is on the left. It's just up from security. We'll get to both of those today. Out of curiosity, does anybody use Notebooks? No? Well, you don't count. But the reality here is that when I actually got hired at Datadog, I did my intro interview on Notebooks because it seemed like the least loved product at Datadog because it's just kind of there. And it's a really interesting product that allows us to do some really cool things. And like we talked about, it gives us universal visibility. So the way this works is effectively, do you have an incident, Mike?
Yes.
Oh no, he has an incident. He's declared an incident. Once he's declared the incident, I thought that was really good. The yes was just heartfelt. But as we declare the incident and we begin to go through this, right, we have the ability for me to make a notebook, have him send it to me, and we can both look at the same notebook. So as we go through and do the runbook, the playbook that we would need to do for an incident, we both have the actual data that we're making decisions on right here. So as we think about the ODA loop, we think about observability, it's a big deal right there. Now, what does this look like? Does it have to be code? Does it have to? No, it doesn't. It can be people writing. That's kind of where things start. As we talk about how you're going to do automation, how you're going to do incident response, build playbooks, runbooks, and all of the things that go along with it. The cool part here is that it can be English. Your HR department should be able to read your runbook and understand what it is. Now they can. Now it may also have code in it, it may have graphs in it, it may have things that they don't understand, but there should be English enough, or appropriate language of your choice, that fits in this block that they understand and have the ability to use. And what happens after that? Well, after that then, we have the ability to move into workflows. Workflows allow us to take the things that we just had in runbooks and actually automate them. So in the end, we have a flow of information, a flow of functions that occur, and that's important. Now we're going to go into our first demo. This is a little tense for us. We're actually going to try to do one of these demos live on stage. That always goes wonderfully, so everybody cross your fingers. Today, however, to begin with, we're going to talk about a CloudTrail entry. Yay, CloudTrail entry. Who can read this from the back row? All right, well, you can't. I get it. So let me zoom in a little bit. As we talk about this, we're going to talk a little bit about creating accounts. Now, as an MSP, when a customer creates an account, what does that mean?
Depends on the scenario. It could be good, it could be bad.
Right. And so if I'm the MSP and my customer has begun creating accounts, now me as the security geek that I am, I see that as a potentially negative side effect. That has some outside things that could really make my life a little bit awkward. So what do I do? Well, if one of my customers is making an account and I'm an MSP, I would probably want to build some monitors and maybe a couple of notebooks to evaluate that, right? So in this case, that we have the ability to do that. We can go ahead and kick off a workflow that allows us to monitor for a specific signal in AWS and move forward with it. Now, this is kind of an interesting point. There are a lot of folks in the world today that have both AWS and other resources elsewhere, right? It's just the way it is. We have offices, we have things that aren't actually in AWS. One of the things that we have the ability to do here is create our own security signal. Now, in the next workflow, in the next demo, as I show it to you live on stage, God, that's silly, we will go ahead and look at how you do that. But what that allows us to do is unify a bunch of different sources of information. So even if I have a data center or I have a whatever, and I have AWS, I can go ahead and unify that into one place, and that lets me have one place to do my code and one place to do my response from, which makes things quicker.
Simplicity is key.
Simplicity is key. Now, as we look at this, we want to make sure that we monitor the signals correctly. Now, we were looking at the creation of an account. So is it really all that awkward if we think about, and I'm going to go back so you can all see it, if we think about the event name being create account, that's not really that awkward, right? I mean, like that's literally putting the type of thing here, the type of monitor would be event creation, right? So I'm creating a monitor, and I'll show you how to do that in a minute. And then I'm going to go ahead and look at this and make sure that they're the same. And then what? Well, if I'm a good MSP, and you are, it's always good to talk to the customer, right? Mm-hmm. So one of the things that I could do as the MSP is go ahead and ask someone at that company to make a decision. But how do I know that person's that person? Do I know that this is Mike? Do I trust that this is Mike if I just send him an SMS message?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not. And we'll get to why in a minute. But realistically, I can send him a Slack message, and we know that that's Mike. A little bit more than an SMS message, probably. Now, that allows Mike to make a yes-no decision, and we have a constant log of that actually occurring. So now Slack logs it, and we actually have the ability to prove it. Now I can go back and do all sorts of stuff. I can go ahead and do saved actions as well. So if I wanted to go ahead and do this response, let's say I'm building this response out, and we're trying to figure out how to deal with this new created account, do I want to go ahead and have a whole saved action section that allow me to speed that up? Well, I can do that too. So what does that look like? Well, that starts looking a lot like this. And this is effectively our workflow for a new account that Mike's company is going to do an MSP for. Or do MSP services for. Sorry about that. And here we are. Now, you'll note that this is not that complicated. It's a bunch of boxes. It looks a little bit like step functions. It's pretty click and off you go. So in a second, when we actually do the next demo, when I open this up live, we'll be able to click through it, and I'm really hoping you guys get a little bit more lively and ask me questions as we go, so I can click a couple of the drop-downs and we can show a couple of things that are occurring. But once we have our new account, and we've gone ahead and ingested it, what does that mean? That means we have to turn into operations.
Now, ChatOps gets a bad rep, and it's not entirely out of place. It was kind of that shiny thing that was quick and easy to do and changed kind of the dynamic of how you would respond to certain events in a lot of businesses. And what that meant was it got implemented perhaps too hastily or without much thought into the overall chain of an event. But if we stop and ask ourselves why ChatOps became a thing and why it got so popular, it starts to make a little more sense. So like, for example, ChatOps tend to be, or interacting with Slack or Teams tends to be more quick and low friction interface for people to use. It's naturally simple, and then there's a short cycle to control. So if something happens, you see a thing, gives you some context, and then you can go ahead and do another thing. If you automate further, you could go downstream of that. But the point is that it was an easy way to deal with complex systems, and for a lot of non-technical people to deal with complex systems.
And I think as we think about this and we talk about ChatOps, does anybody remember hearing some of the bad stuff that happened with ChatOps? So I think my favorite was the guy that did ChatOps and then had the ability to go ahead and delete his entire environment in the Slack channel. And things like that are obviously bad. We're not talking about that type of ChatOps. And just to be 100% clear, we're talking about types of ChatOps that allow us to evaluate whether a user wants an action to occur. Mm-hmm. So think about it more like crowdsourcing security from the point of view of, do your users actually need the ability to do this thing? If someone checks in a bunch of code, would they be okay with that, or is that weird for them? Should you Slack them and evaluate, hey, did you actually just check this code in, or is it somebody else?
And along those lines, if we ask why people use ChatOps and then follow that up with what are some good scenarios that you can use them? Nathan was just talking about one. Alerting a group or group of users, quick human-to-human interactions, so you don't have to use SMS. Chances are that whatever system you use, whether it's Slack or Teams, there's other controls or guardrails in place, such as MFA and other things tied to that service, so it's better than SMS generally. It's a lower barrier to entry and easy to implement, so you don't need to have a team of people building out a system just to, escalate somebody, for example.
Now, when we think about incident response and we think about the things that we can add together to create this really cool thing, okay, let's be very honest. If we think about this in a flow of information, we can't respond to something that we can't see, right? There's no way for us to do that. Operations without observability then becomes just kind of blind action. Firefighting. We're not really thinking strategically about what actually needs to happen. And detection then has to be based on these things, but it has to be specifically based on events, not just an opinion, not just someone's thoughts. So a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, I did a talk that dealt with guard duty and a bunch of other stuff that then went through this very process. And I kind of tried to recreate my slide here so that it is somewhat reminiscent of the original incident response talk that I gave a long time ago. Now, as we look at this, it becomes something that, in my mind, is a little complicated. It doesn't seem horribly simple. And it seems a little bit more like a Rube Goldberg machine, right? I'm just waiting for the bowling ball to roll down the hill. And because of that, it kind of goes through this pattern. We have an unauthorized user. We have something odd happen. We have your environment. We then have an event go to CloudWatch, and then we have a step function, and then we have a Lambda responder, and then we're actually going to do the thing. So if we think about all of the steps here, this was a good way to do it. Honestly, at the time, this was cutting edge, and I was proud to actually write this stuff up. It was neat stuff. We had the ability to do a step function, have it fire a Lambda, have a Lambda fire an actual systems, a simple systems manager function. That meant that we could actually act inside of an EC2 instance. It was cool stuff. I was really proud of it. But the problem here is that it really was complex. It was complex to monitor, it was complex to implement, and it was complex to maintain. Now we've got a bunch of these things, and frankly, as we go back to the statement about data centers and the world around us, we might have to modify, we might have to upkeep, operate those things in a bunch of different places as opposed to modifying it in one place. So how do we get around that? Well, AWS was kind enough to create this thing called Eventbridge. Eventbridge is a way to unify and distribute events to specific endpoints. And in this case, we're actually distributing them to both Datadog and Slack. Now, that looks complicated too, but this is really what it is. It is an Eventbridge rule that delivers to an API destination. So for all intents and purposes, you've built this Eventbridge rule, and poof, you're done. That's not so hard, in my mind, anyway. Now, that means that this turns into the second system. So now we're looking at more of an unauthorized user. A thing happens, an event happens. We're able to go ahead and use our environment. Eventbridge pushes that information to Datadog, and then we're able to act. That means that we've removed a lot of weak points in this architecture that was a little bit large and cumbersome potentially. It means that we've dealt with a lot of the different events that AWS does a wonderful job of giving us events, but that's not the only source. Now we can make other types of events and shove those in there as well, and we have a singular place to put those events and get them on the other side. As well, if we want to start looking at this from multi-data centers, we have the ability to do that. We have the ability to look at a multi-cloud concept and use this system as a way to funnel the pieces parts to where they need to go. What does this do in the end? It reduces complexity. We have visibility into all of our pieces, and we increase the velocity for the folks like Mike. Now the demo too. Everybody cross your fingers. Here we go. All righty, here we go. So this is one of the things that we had talked about earlier, right? We all remember this one, where we were actually looking at a workflow that allowed us to go ahead and send a Slack message. As we click on this, we're going to see that it says that it is currently the reinforce create monitor function. Now, in this function, we have the ability to name it, and because we've named it, it's going to fire. Now, what that means when we get into Datadog and we look at what's going on, if we look at the functions, if we look at the signals system inside of Datadog and we look at the actual security system, we go here, and then we go here, right? That's going to pop this screen back up, and we're going to see all of our security signals. Yeah, I get it. This isn't actually Datadog. This is a demo environment. I promise Datadog is not actually seeing all these security issues. But as we click on them, and we have the ability to look inside of that issue, we have a bunch of things in here that look a little bit interesting, right? We can actually go ahead and escalate to investigation, and right now we're not really going to get into that. But if we look at the behind the scenes of this rule, we have the ability back here. Do you see that? So we've gone ahead and specified which workflow we're going to fire this to. So now I have this really interesting rule, if we go back over here and take a look, that is credentials modified non-binary. Now as we think about that, what does that mean? If my credential file has been modified and I'm in AWS, is that a good thing? If a credential file for a production system has ever been modified, is your security team happy? I've got one guy shaking his head, making a funny face. We get that that's a bad thing, right? So as that happens then, really bad things are probably on the way next. And what does that mean? Well, that means if we go over here, we probably want to make a decision, right? We probably want to go ahead and ask someone, hey, is this really an important thing? And if I go ahead and I Slack Mike or Mike Slacks me and says, hey, Nate, did you really mean for that to happen? And I say, yes, honestly, it's okay. You have the ability to actually chat with me and make sure that I'm really Nathan, right? Now, to be clear, is the chat signal actually changing things in your AWS environment? Say it with me, no. It is Mike that would be changing things back or doing the fixing. But we are communicating and starting the chat with the potential user, me, in that mode. Now, once that happens, as we look at how this is going to go, what would we do next? Probably want to go ahead and send an email, right? May not be a bad idea. And then after that, what would we want to do? Well, if it were me, I would probably do something like blocking the user, potentially looking at some of the things that were going on. But one of the things that might be interesting is, depending on how this whole thing has happened, what type of an attack is this? And if I go over to saved actions and I would go ahead and go down to one of the saved alerts that I have every opportunity to go ahead and click on something like this. What does that mean? Well, that means that I've gone ahead and created an incident automatically. So that's created a notebook for me that's kicked off the incident, and it's gone ahead and alerted everybody that's involved in this particular group so that they know that something bad is happening. Now it's just not me and Mike chatting. It's a whole bunch of people that are dealing with an actual event. Now the trick here is that we don't want this to take a long time. We want it to be malleable, and we want things to be able to happen. So I'm going to risk it. Can everybody raise their hand if they have an idea? What other things would we like to do? Oh, come on, folks. I'm giving you the opportunity to make me look like a fool. Please, on stage. Nothing? Oh, come on, somebody. What would you do?
What would I do?
I'm going to say AWS.
Yeah.
So if we go to AWS, maybe we would want to go ahead and look at our EC2 instances. And maybe for a second, we're going to go ahead and actually list them, because let's make sure that nothing has changed. So maybe we go ahead and we list the security group rules. What would that do? Well, that would be, let's say, that would be me. Oh, we're still in the incident. So let's go ahead and kick that off. So here's Nathan Case, right? It's a Sev 4. But we also want to make sure that we list the security groups. So I could go ahead and look at the connection, and obviously we're going to go with testing, not prod. And then as we look at this, we'd want to go ahead and filter. So what would we filter for? Maybe we're going ahead and filtering for something in production specifically so that we understood what that was. We can totally do that here. And we can filter by the IDs. If we wanted to filter a specific ID or a specific limit, we also have the ability to do that. Anybody else want to give me something else they would like to look for? Opportunity. All right. Now, if we click this off, what's going to happen is I can go ahead and hit run. Now, what's happening right now is that you'll note that I have a new instance that's fired up here. I can go ahead and click there. Should we accept it or deny it?
Deny.
Deny. All right, so it's not really an incident. Now, once we've done that, we're back to the workflow. And you'll note our workflow has gone ahead and emailed me that, hey, somebody actually had this incident, and we've gone ahead and evaluated it, but it's not really an incident. So worst case scenario, had Mike actually punched me in the face and taken my cell phone, and he said, no, it's not an incident, I still get an email, in the hospital probably, saying that it is indeed an incident. So as we go forward, this is really what we want to look at from an automation and an incident response workflow concept, right? This gives me the tools as the incident responder to plan a lot of this stuff, both in networks, or in notebooks, and then actually build them here. Now I got to figure out how to get it back.
Carefully.
Any other questions before I switch it back? All right. I believe this is you. And just in case, we actually prepped a bunch of slides here to make sure that it did work. All right, there you go.
So considerations. First and foremost, don't test in prod. The demo was going to be recorded, but it wasn't, so forget that
I got
part.
brave.
Yeah. Increased automation, kind of talking about what we were going over earlier. When you increase automation to a degree, you're abstracting a part of your process, and that's okay as long as you understand what you're abstracting in the context of your environment and what your end goal is. It also requires perhaps some degree of maturity within your organization, as well as robust monitoring and or guardrails that can help kind of keep things in balance when automations go awry, which can and probably will happen at some point.
It's important to remember that one of the things that you should be doing here is using notebooks. Jupyter notebooks are great. If you've never used them before, this is the moment to start looking at that and making sure you understand step by step, this is what the automation is going to do.
And one other little piece that we're tossing in here is opinionated choices. The more you understand your environment, the more leeway you have or the more opportunity you have to make specific choices and be opinionated about those, and ultimately the better the outcome will be. And then finally, probably the most important thing, and going back to the feedback loops again, is that Security is a journey. It's never static or standing still, and anything you're doing at this point forward is going to be different, a month from now. Take that feedback and put it back into your thought process and improve your automation.
So in closing, what are we going to look at? So let's be honest, documentation is king. The first thing you need to do for incident response is document, 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 right? I hate to be this way. I know it sounds silly. I know that probably I've said it for years now. I've never been to an incident yet where I say to myself, gee, I have so much documentation. I don't know what to do. It never happens. So honestly, the first best thing you can do is document. I really like notebooks to do it in. Up to you guys. Test, test, test.
Try a full automation today.
Yeah. So you have to try it, you have to test it, you have to make sure it's going to do what you expect it to do. The only way to get to this point is to try it. And if you don't know how to try it and you only have a production system, I get it, that's a scary moment. You're going to have to figure out how to do a test that isn't production. Please do a test that isn't production. And as we said originally, incident response really is this distilled expression of your technical strategy. Are you actually spending the time to document? Are you actually spending the time to understand the technical environment in which you operate? And if the answer is no, or you don't have runbooks, you don't have playbooks, you haven't planned out how to deal with some of these things, then that's what that incident is going to express out of you, is the reality that this work needs to happen prior to you actually having that incident. So it's not just security. In the end, it's quite a bit of things. So to-dos. Build shared observability. You start all of this process by understanding what's actually happening in your environment together. Build a security architect program. Understand that security isn't just something that a person in the corner that is ex-military potentially, is a security person. That's not really what we're looking for. We're looking for security to be everybody. We're looking for security to have everyone involved, developers, security people, and operationalists. And you do that by shared observability. Build your own dictionary. I really am a big fan of deciding that, you know what, attack surface and all of these scary terms that we got from any number of different places and James Bond movies probably aren't the best way to describe some of these things. Come up with your own way to do it. And use the OSS Champions program. So one of the things Datadog is doing in the next couple of quarters is taking our security champions program and making it open source so everybody can use it. Thank you.